Kadosh Boker Or Masechet Nazir Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph 51a1. Tan Rabbanan, it says in a Braita, Ezu met sheyesh lo rakav. What is a met that has a rakav, which is going to be mitameh ba'ohel, and a nazir will have to come and start shaving off his hair for it. So it says met shenikbar arom be'aron shel shayish or gaberet tzpa shel avanim. When you have a deceased person that was buried without clothing in an aron of marble, right, in a marble coffin, or in on top of the floor, which was basically made out of avanim, of stones. Zil met sheish lo rakav. This is a met that has rakav, which usually that means the body disintegrates into dust, because basically since there's no rikavon after a zafar, because the shaish and evin they do not mix. But nikbar biksuto, but if he's going to be buried with clothing, or be'aron shel etz, or in a wooden coffin, or on top of a stone floor, right? There's no din of rakav l'tameh ba'ohel, because basically there's other things which were also mixed in with the deceased, whether it's his clothing, whether it's going to be from the wood, or whether it's going to be from the dust, which is by the bricks, right? That it comes clinging to him. So therefore, it does not have the din of rakav to be mitameh ba'ohel. Amar Ula says, En rakav ela ba min habasar min hagidim mani v'tzomot. When do we say that it's going to be rakav? Rakav has to be when it's from all these things, which is going to be whether it's the flesh, the sinews, or the bones. But if not, it's not going to be mitameh. So Eitve Rava leula, Rava comes and he asks Ula, rakav ba min habasar tahor. If it's going to come from the basar, it's going to be tahor. Ha mina etzem. But if it comes from the bones, it's going to be tameh. Even though there's no flesh. Meaning, if you're going to tell me right now that there's no flesh, there's only bones, it's not rakav. So says the Gemara, no, you have to say the opposite. Rakav ba min habasar tahor. If the rakav only came from the flesh, it's going to be tahor. Ad sheyesh etzem babasar, until the rakav has basar and etzem. Meaning, it's not just enough the flesh that becomes like dust. It has to be flesh with a bone. Once it's flesh with bones, then it becomes tameh. But if it's only from bones, it's going to be tahor. Okay, so in order for it to be considered a kav, you need flesh and bones. So ask the Gemara, what about the sinus? We said a few lines up that it had to be from the en rakav ela, there was ula. Amar ula, ending rakav b'min masar gidim atzamot. You need three things. You need flesh, bones, and sinus. Here we didn't bring down sinus, we only brought down flesh and bones. So says the Gemara, it's impossible that you have flesh and you have bones and you don't have the sinews. The sinews have to be there if there's going to be flesh and bones. The second of there's flesh and bones, there has to be sinews there. Okay. Next, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rabbi Yochanan says Rav Shmuel bar Rabbi named Yochanan. Shne metim shekavran ze im ze. What happens if you bury two deceased people together? Nasu gilgalin ze lezeh. So therefore, the rekav of each one of them becomes a tarovet with the other one, and it's going to be batel tuma. So it comes out that there's no din of rekav. However, though it's not, it wasn't accepted lalacha. Okay, because he wants to say that this halacha of tumat rekav was only if they were buried by themselves. I mean, you have these burial plots, whether it was during COVID, that in certain places in the world they just threw everybody in the same thing, or bar minan during the Holocaust or other places where there was just mass graves, as they call them. So for there's no din of rekav, because since all the bodies are together, there's no din of rekav. So Mati Rav Natan comes and asks a question. Rakav ba mishne metim tameh. It says mefurash, right? The what? The rakav that comes from two metim is tameh. So don't tell me that it's gilgalin zeh, which means that it's permitting each other. But here it's mefurash, and it is going to be tameh. So Amar Rava comes and he says shekavru ze bifnei atzmo v'zeh bifnei atzmo. If you buried at the beginning each one on their own, virkivu, right, and then they disintegrated. Okay, and then you have already the tumat rekav, and then they got mixed together. Ve'amdu al melot arvad rakav, and then it came together. That's the halacha when we're saying that even though there's no rekav on each one by themselves, okay, they're going to be mitzaref. But if they are buried together, really be'emet, it's like what Rabbi Yochanan says, they become gilgalin zelazeh, and there's no problem. Okay, Amar Rabba Barchan Am Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Yochanan name Rabbi Yochanan. Kazaz se'aro ukvaro imo. Imagine a person came, they cut off his hair of the deceased, and they buried the hair with the body. So nasu gilgulin, it became gilgulin to the rechav that it's going to be mbateloto from the rakav, because the hair is not the flesh, bones, and gidin and sinews, and therefore when it all disintegrates to become dust, it's going to annul it. So Tanan Hatam, we learned over there in Mishnah Nalot, Kol shebemet tameh chutz min hashanem v'aseh v'tzipor, and anything of a met is going to be tameh except for the teeth, hair, and the nails, right? Which are, that means if you're going to come and you're going to cut off the hair, the nails, or the teeth, you're going to pull out the teeth, it's not metameh. Uveshat chiburan, now if they're going to come and be connected to the deceased, kulan tmeim, there is tameh. So what's going on over here? Here you do see that if it's mechubar to the met, if it's connected to the met, it is metameh. So says the Gemara, you see from here, right, that if somebody's going to touch or be ma'ahil on some part of the body when it's connected, it is going to be metameh. But, right, as we mentioned before, if it's going to be cut off, then it's not. So this is mine. What about when you already have hair which is standing to be cut off, or nails which is standing to be cut? Do we say anything which you're going to cut off is like gazuz dami, it's like already cut off? Or maybe we say but right now they're attached, meaning it's long enough that you're going to cut it off, but right now it's attached. So we're going to come and answer it's only if you cut it off, but if you didn't cut it off, it's not. So you see from here that as long as it's connected, even if it's long enough that you need to cut it off, it's still connected. So says Gemara, no, hachi kamar, maybe this is what it means to say. Gazaz, if you cut it off, hareze gilgalim. Lo gazaz, but if you didn't cut it off, nibaile, we still have a doubt. And therefore we're going to have to try to answer it. So by Rabbi Yomi comes and he asks Rakav b'mina ekev, what about if the Rakav comes from the ekev, the leg of the met? The knee, the ankle. And when do we say rakav haba mikulame from the entire body? But if it comes from the ekev, no. Or maybe that doesn't matter. Meaning any part of the body that becomes a rakav is going to become a tameh. So Tashema, we're going to try to bring proof to Tanya and Natam Rishia. Rakav haba mishtemetim tameh. If it comes from two different diseases, it's going to be tameh. If you're going to tell me now, haba mina ekev lo, that if it comes from the ankle, no. Zil hacha dilma dercha ekev kati. Maybe part of the rekev came from the ekev, and it's not going to be mitameh. V'hachan, if you go the other way around, dilma derech rekev kati, maybe be'emet, when you go to the other met, also it came from the rekev. And therefore, why do we say that when you have two people separate, right, it's going to be mitameh, maybe each one only became rekev through the ankle. And you're telling me right now that if it's from the ankle, it's not mitameh. So the Gemara says, if you're going to tell me that everything was nirkav, and then it only was with the ekev, with it together, hachanam, you're right. But here, there was only one limb, right, that was close to the ekev, and the ekev was nirkav with it, and the rest of it was not nirkav. Means we're talking about parts of the body that disintegrated first. So the one that was beside the ankle disintegrated first, and you have the ankle right there. So he says, what's halacha? So Teiku, we don't have the answer. And we continue in Bezot Hashem after. By Rabbi Yomi comes and he asks the following question: Ubar bim'ei isha, a fetus in the woman's stomach. Havi gilgilim, is it a gilgilim to the mother or not? Which means, if right now the mother and the ubar were buried together, is that considered? I mean, basically, she died, and obviously the child, the fetus, was not taken out on time, and therefore the fetus also died. So are they considered gilgilim to each other, which means that it's considered like two different deceased being buried to each other, and therefore there's no din of rakav. So says the Gemara, Kevin Amar Mor, since Mor says, Ubari erechimo. What does that mean, Ubari erechimo? We're talking about the ubar is considered part of the mother. Hilkach, therefore, gufai hu, it's the same body. Velovi gilgulin, so it's not considered gilgulin. Or dilmar, maybe given the sofo latzet, maybe at the end of the day, the ubar is supposed to separate from the mother. So therefore, mifresh parishmine, so it's already considered separated. V'imtim tzolomana, if you're going to tell me now, ubar the sofo latzet mifresh parishmina, that it's considered already separated, nun aleph amud bet 51b, shichvat zera b'meisha. When you have shichvat zera in the womb of the woman, which means that obviously she had relations with her husband, and then immediately afterwards she passed away, right? And what happens is, what's halacha? Do we say given the luitzar? So since at the end of the day it wasn't notzar with it, right? So therefore it's still considered from this Shichvat Zera, so therefore Kiguf Adam it's like considered the body. Or Dima, given the since at the end of the day the Zera comes from an outward, from the external, it's not considered part of the body, and therefore it's like Gilgalim. Right? So that's another doubt. We still didn't answer it. Next doubt, by Rav Papa. Rav Papa asks, Pirsha, right? What happens right now if a woman comes and she has excremation, right? And
they didn't wash her when she did the
yes,
Tara. They
and then
do the Tara
they didn't do it properly, which means that she had the excretion afterwards. So now what's halacha? Kevin delo mekaima bedelo achla chayuta. No. Well, it's inside, right? But this is the perish, the tzoah, which is inside. But they didn't do it properly. Sometimes, by the way, this is one of the most difficult parts of the Tara, which they have to they have to also they push right on the stomach. And that way, and then they have the hose. Sometimes they push the hose. Yeah, and it all depends. But okay, fine. But basically, you have your perish, you have excrement.
They do that.
Yeah, they have excrement in the body. So, given the look, mikaima pedulo achla chayutahi, right? Since right now the woman cannot be there without that, it's going to eat. So therefore, the mazon, the food, is considered chayuta, and therefore the perish in itself, which comes from the food, is part of her body. Or dilmar maybe hanami mamati, it comes from the outside. So therefore, just like the Shichvat Zera is coming from the outside, so too the food comes from the outside, and therefore, right, it's not going to be part of the body, and therefore it's going to be Gilgalim. Another Safek, by Rav Acha, Bered Ravika, or Ro, the skin of the deceased. Ma what's halacha? Right? Is that Gilgalim Lamet or not? By Rav Huna Bamenuach, Kicho V'nio, the rock or the chotem, the mucus or the phlegm. What's halacha? So Amar Lishmuel Bar Acha. The Rav Papa says, Rav Shmuel Bar Acha to Rav Papa, Visa, you're going to tell me now. Kol Hani de Kamar Gilgalin, that all this that we're talking about is Gilgalin. So how do you find Rekev? Every single met will still have, whether it's going to be the skin, the hair, or all the other things, whether it's going to be phlegm or the mucus in the nose, or all these things. So therefore, how are you going to find Rekev? So answers the Gemara, what are you talking about? The Ashki Med de Kalim. What happened was you gave him to drink before the person passed away. Made the kalim. Made the kalim causes shilshulim. It causes diarrhea, which means that it would have gotten rid of all the different cleanse the entire body. The sachya nasha. Then they went and they put the skin. They put it with a type of a cream which takes off all the hair, and therefore there was no hair on the body, on the skin. Right? Ushlako b'metveria. And then after a person passed away, they cooked him in the chamet veria in order that the skin. They skinned him basically, and then they buried him. So therefore, the person didn't have skins as well. So that's a case where you could have that this person did not have skin, did not have hair, he did not have any excrement or anything else because we got rid of all that basically. Fine.
They're talking about the Chamet Iveria, no?
Amar Abaye says, Nikitina, we have a Masoret in our hands. Masechta en lo rakav. Even though it became afar through tchina, through the coming and grinding, right? It was not, right? It's not the tumat rekev, only by afar and not afar tfina, which means if they came and they grinded it to pulverize it, it's not considered rekev. So now they have a question. What's happening if they crushed it, right? And then afterwards, it disintegrated into the afar. At the end of the day, it's got the flesh, sinews, and the bones, and it still has it. Or Dilmar, maybe you need it from the beginning, like the original form. And here, the fact that they crushed it, it's not going to be considered the original form. So take we don't have an answer. Tani Ula Bar Chanina says Ula Bar Chanina met shechaser. If you have a met that he's lacking, right, an eved, it doesn't matter which type of a limb or which type of organ. En lo rekev velo tfisa. It does not have the rekev. That means there's no tumat rekev because it has to be only a met shalem, and there's no din of tfusa. Which means that if you're going to find a kever on the derech, they're going to come and they're going to put a place for it. It holds its place, which means that the ground underneath it, right, is there. Now with a met which is chaser, we don't say that it takes its tfusa wherever it's holding, right? Velo shkunat kvarot, and also it doesn't have a din of shkunat kvarot. It means if you found three deceased people, one beside each other, we suspect that it's like a cemetery. It's like mamash bet kvarot kavua, right? No? Which one?
That's what they.
It's three of them together. When you have three together, we suspect that it's considered a bet kvarot kavua. Now, then you have to check all around to make sure that there's nobody else. Here, it's only if you find three deceased people that are intact. If you're going to find them, they're chaser, we do not suspect two shkunat kvarot, even though you found three. So Meitvei, we're going to ask the following question, right? Lo ima marta bemet sheyesh lo, right? Uverova o melo tarvad rakav. Tomar bechai she'en lo lo rov velo rova velo melo tarvad kavad. He comes and he says like this. We cannot learn with this that we're talking about a met. We spoke about a met that a kazait of the basar is going to be mitameh, which is very, very chamur. Or you've got the majority of the bones, right? Or you remember the majority of the bones, or the majority of the binyan, which was the shok and the yerech, and then the spinal cord, even though it doesn't have the majority of the bones, right? The rova, right? Or milot tarvad rakav, or you have a rova of a kav, which is a quarter of a kav, or a spoonful of the rakav. Tomar bechai, chai is different. That is going to be tameh even with the kazait. Yeah, which means that maybe the Torah did not say kazai basar metameh only by tumat met, but not by tumat ever min chai, which is much less. So says the Gemara, ve'echidami. Now, what is the case exactly? Teir kav chad evad, v'kavate legabe met, afilu chad evad yikarakav. That means basically that this one limb of the chai, like I told you the other day, they had to cut somebody else's hand off, right? So it's going to have a kazait, right? So now on this hand you have a kazait, and now they have to bury it, but now it was tumat rakav, right? So therefore he says, just like by the met, even if it's going to be one ever, there's going to be rakav. So to here, if it's going to be from the chai, it should also be the same thing, no? And not that there's only there's no rakav by met shechaser. So says the Gemara, miktani hamet, that we learned that it died. Hakamash malan shum met yesh lo rakav, shum chai en lo rakav. A deceased, any type of a deceased, right? As long as he's going to be buried shalem, he has rakav. But every min chai en lo rakav, and therefore you could say that a met which was chaser, there's no rakav by met. Means if he was deceased and he was lacking a body part, there's no rakav. The rakav is only if he's met shalem. You cannot bring a proof from a chai. Okay? So by Rava comes and he asks, Hirkiv keshu chai. What happens if one of the membranes became rakuv when he was alive and then he died? Right? Some people say that it's actually mechubar to the goof of the adam, and some people say no, that it was actually cut off.
Like they cut it off before.
Yeah, they cut it off before. Then it became rakav. And then the person died. Okay, so what's halacha? Ki gemir rakav the irkiv keshumet. When do we need the rakav? That when it's actually going to be that irkiv when he's dead, not when he's alive. Or din mahashtam yadmeh. But 1 second, right now he died. So you're right. It was already nirkav before, but right now he's dead. So right now he passed away. So Tashma, we're going to try to bring a proof. Lo imamarta b'met sheish lo rov rova umlo tava tamar b'chai. Tamam mishum chaya, you know he's alive. Hamet yesh lo rakav. So to here, that means even though this body part was hirkiv, it became rakav, right? It became when he was still alive. But right now, if he died, that's it. So says the Gemara, miktani hamet. Do we say that he died? Kamashmalan the shum met yesh lo rakav, right? A met, right, does have rakav. Shum chaya no rakav, but a person that's alive does not have rakav, even though he died afterwards. Meaning the fact, in order for it to be rakav, it has to be that he's dead. And now the body part becomes a rakav. If it happened beforehand, even though now he died, doesn't help. Fine. By Rava comes and he asks, Nimala shechesara mau. We know that if a person comes and he eats a nimala, he's going to be chayav malkut, because you're not allowed to eat any type of shratzim, even though there's no kazait.
Malkut?
What? Lashes. Yeah? A person. What?
It's not
no. Karet? No, a person does not get karet for non-kosher. Non-kosher? Which one? Nimala, an ant. A-N-T. Not your ant, A-U-N-T. Yeah. When you eat the shvatzim, there's no, even pig, there's no karet on pig. There's no karet on shemona shvatzim. There's negative commandments. That's why we said it's worse to eat a bug than to eat pig. Because pig is one negative commandment. A bug could be 5 or 6. But it's negative commandments. There's no karet. There's no karet. Maybe you're thinking about blood. Blood has karet. Blood has karet. But not creepy crawlers.
They don't have blood. They don't have
No. Only blood of blood of human is actually mutar. Blood of an animal. Right? But here it's not. If you eat the creepy crawlers, you're eating an ant. There's malkut, but there's no karet. So here the chidush though is that even though you don't have a kazait, because usually any type of an isur in the Torah, you need a kazait. If you're going to eat less than a kazait, you don't get lashes. Here the chidush is by an ant, you get lashes even though there's no kazait. So now what happens right now if, right, you're eating a nimala, that basically, let's say they cut off the legs and you ate that. So that means, let's say it could still live. So the Gemara is going to ask, Shiura Gemiran La Chaser. Do we need a shiur and here it's chaser, right? Or birya gmira, or you need a birya. You need an entire body. Va'ika, and you have it, right? So therefore, it's not because of a shiur. And therefore, even though this chasera is still a birya because it could still live. And therefore, if you're going to eat it, you're going to be chayav. Meaning, is it a special shiur? So if you didn't eat the legs, it's nothing. Or it's a birya. It's a birya before that's why. It's a creation. And therefore, if you're going to come in and you're going to eat it, it's going to be a problem. So the Gemara is going to answer it.
It's like the broccoli when you make it.
Amar Rav Yehuda midiskarta tashama. So says Rav Yehuda midiskarta tashama. We're going to try to bring a proof. When it says kol nogea bahem b'motam itmad arev yachol bekulan, I would have thought to say that's in all of it, which means that the sheretz has to be shalem. Tamulomar mehem. What does it mean mehem? Mehem itma. So mehem means even in part of it. Mehem, if it's going to be part of it, yachol means satan. Would have thought to say in part of it. Tamulomar bahem. It has to be in it. You're not. So what does it mean then? Mehem, part of it. Yeah. What does it mean? Part of it or thing? Ha-case, what's the case then? You have to touch the part of the sheretz, but only the part which is chashuv, like a sheretz shalem. It has to be like a adasha, like a kitniyat, like a bean. Shekena chomet, because for example, this is one of the shmona shatzim, one of the 8 creatures. The chomet, the beginning of it is like a kadasha. And therefore he comes and he says when it's going to be formed. So therefore it says whether it's going to be big or small, and therefore l'tomei kasheretz. So shema mina shiura gemina. So it comes that we learned over here that it's a shiur. So nimala, which is lacking part of it, it's lacking from the shiur. So if you're not going to be chayav, because if you're going to tell me now that you cut off just the legs, but you have the entire rest of the body, so to the chomet also the beginning is without legs. It's very, very small. Right? You need that. So Amar Shemaya says Shemaya, right? Kiba'inan shiura. When do we need the shiur? He comes and he says, Devedelo havya kadasha lo metameh. That if it's not going to be like kadasha, it's not going to be metameh. Lo nafla b'neshama, because there's no neshama yet. It's still not alive, right? Unless it's got a kadasha, but not less than that. Ava nafla b'neshama. But if it's going to have a neshama at the beginning, even though now it's going to be lacking the legs, right? It is considered a birya because it can still live. So to bailecha. So then that was the question, and we do not have the answer. Have a wonderful day.